Welcome to Educate for Life Online. This is the third class in our course, Created on Purpose or Evolved by Chance. Today we're going to be talking about dinosaurs and whether they support the creation account in the Bible or the theory of evolution. Let's get started.
This is my 9th video on Kevin Conover's online course for young Earth creationists, and it'll be the second video in the series of Did Man Walk with Dinosaurs?
You may be asking yourself, why doesn't the Bible use the word dinosaur? Well, this fellow here that I just zoomed in on, he looks kind of like a zombie. He's the guy that invented the word dinosaur. His name is Sir Richard Owen. He did this in 1841, and the Bible was written thousands of years before he came up with the word dinosaur. So of course the word dinosaur is not going to be in the Bible. Before 1841, they were known as what? Dragons.
Well, that is an assumption that most young Earth creationists make, but I think you'll see by the end of the video that the evidence just doesn't add up.
Deuteronomy 32:33 mentions dragons. It says their wine is the poison of dragons. In Psalm 74:13, it says, "Thou breakest the heads of the dragons in the waters."
Well, while there were many ancient marine reptiles, there were no marine dinosaurs.
In fact, dragons are mentioned 34 times in the Bible. Even in 1891, the word dinosaur was still not in the American dictionary. This is from a 1946 dictionary. It says here, "Now rare, a huge serpent, a fabulous animal, generally a monstrous winged scaly serpent, lizard, or saurian." Isn't it interesting that in this dictionary they say now rare? They don't say mythical. Now I like the third definition here. It says a fierce or very strict person, especially a woman. Don't go around calling women dragons, though. That would be offensive, unless they're extremely strict.
So I tried to do some research on this claim of the 1946 dictionary that lists dragons as very rare, but I really wasn't able to find much. In Ken Ham's New Answers book, Volume 4, he quotes it, and down the references he lists New Century Dictionary, New York, and it was reprinted in 1948, so that's about as close as I could come. I did find an edition of the New Century Dictionary online, but it's from the 1700s, and it says, "A fabulous animal common to the conceptions of many primitive races and times," or, as in the Bible, an indefinite creature of great size or fierceness. Now I wanted to clear up what they meant by conception, so I looked that one up too in the same dictionary. It says the act or power of conceiving in the mind or of forming a concept, that which is conceived in the mind, a product of the imaginative or inventive faculty. So you can see that by the 1700s they were describing dragons as the product of an imagination.
Okay, so there are thousands of legends of people seeing or killing dragons all over the world throughout history. In Asia, we can start here. This is the Han Dynasty Dragon. It's dated from 206 BC to 220 AD. That's over 2,000 years old. The piece looks remarkably like a theropod dinosaur, including the correct posture, dermal spines, and forearms that end in three-fingered hands. This is incredible because you have to ask yourself, how did they know what this dinosaur looked like if there was no paleontology at the time? They weren't digging up dinosaur bones. And yet there it is, almost identical to what we know of this dinosaur today. How did they know that? Well, maybe it's because they actually saw the dinosaur and they modeled their statue off that dinosaur, which was very rare at the time, but existed.
Well, notice the knees are bent in the wrong direction, the head and neck are all wrong, but let's keep going. We got a lot to cover this video.
One Chinese legend tells of a famous Chinese man named Yu. After the Great Flood, Yu surveyed the land of China, divided it into sections. He built channels to drain the water off to the sea, and he helped make the land livable again. Many snakes and dragons were driven from the marshlands when Yu created the new farmlands. Now here's the question. Why did they throw the word dragons in there? Is it because they wanted to spice up the story? Or was it because they actually were driving snakes and dragons from the land?
Well, I got a question too. How come it doesn't mention Noah? And why did so many people survive this great flood in China if in the Hebrew myth it says everybody but 7 people died?
Why does the Chinese calendar have 11 real animals and 1 mythical dragon? This is very interesting. Notice there on the calendar, you've got the rooster, the dog, you've got the boar, you've got the rat, you've got the ox, the tiger, You've got the sheep, the monkey, the snake, the rabbit, and the horse. And hey, let's just throw in a creature that's not real just for fun. Is that what was going on, or is there a real dragon that they were referring to?
Well, I doubt they did it just for fun. They probably did. At least many of them thought that dragons were real. We know that ancient people found fossils from time to time. Imagine finding something like this and what your imagination could do with it. They had no concept of deep time or even extinction, so to them, many of them probably thought they were still around.
Marco Polo lived in China for 17 years, around 1271 AD, and he reported that the emperor was actually raising dragons to pull his chariots in parades. In 1611, the emperor appointed the post of a royal dragon feeder. Many books even tell of Chinese families raising dragons to use their blood for medicines and highly prizing their eggs. And so, again, we see here that throughout history there are stories of dragons, and they don't seem mythical. They seem like people are actually recording actual evidence of people living with some sort of a dinosaur-like creature.
I wonder how many of these creationists know that Marco Polo never actually wrote anything. His tales were second-hand because they were told to an inmate that he shared a cell with in prison. He was also known for embellishing his tales.
This is an 800-year-old Buddhist temple in Cambodia with Stegosaur carving on the side. I'll zoom in on it here. You can see there on the left kind of a broader picture, and then as we zoom in, there are all kinds of animals carved on this monastery, but there, right there, zooming in, it looks like a what? What kind of an animal is that? It's not a dog. Looks like some sort of a Stegosaurus.
The Cambodian Stegosaur carving is like the myth that just won't die with some creationists, even though Answers in Genesis says it's an argument they shouldn't use. Instead of looking like a stegosaur, it's almost a spitting image of a Javan rhinoceros with a stylized background. The Javan rhinoceros would have been known to people at that time in Cambodia. Look at these two guys with the same shaped plates on the top of their head all the way down to their feet. Were they stego people? Look at this guy with plates on top of his head that obviously represent hair, and others that obviously represent teeth. These are all from the same temple.
And then they've got all these other real animals carved there. Is it possible that they actually saw this animal?
And was this a real animal? This is found directly below the rhino, an upright walking lion that carries a sword and almost the same shaped plates at the top of his head and for his teeth.
Alexander the Great reported that when he conquered parts of what is now India in 326 BC, his soldiers were scared by the great dragons that lived in the caves.
Well, maybe he stashed some treasures there and he didn't want people to find the caves. That's a lot more likely than dragons.
This is a Russian medallion showing a man killing a dragon.
And here's one with a griffin, another mythical creature.
This 32-foot-long creature weighed around 4,000 pounds. It was caught or dragged up off the ocean floor by Japanese fishermen off the coast of New Zealand in 1977. One of the guys on board was a marine biologist, and he examined it very closely. He sketched it, and he said this is some sort of a plesiosaurus. The Japanese actually had it made into a postage stamp. They were so convinced that it was a plesiosaurus.
This is another one of those evidences that even Answers in Genesis says not to use. It turns out that it was a basking shark.
This is Lake Kusharo in Japan. Many people have reported seeing some sort of a lake monster in there, some sort of a plesiosaur-like creature. Hundreds of locals say they've seen it since 1973. This is another lake over in Japan, Akita, where people claim to have seen a lake monster of sorts.
Yeah, sure they have, and I bet tourism is up too.
How about in the Middle East? This is a slate palette showing the triumph of King Narmer and long-necked dragons on the palette. There you have it right there. What kind of creatures are those? Did they see them? Remember, paleontology is the study of bones, digging up bones and looking at the bones. There was no paleontology. Paleontology is a very young science. It's only been around for 150, 200 years. Why would people put dinosaurs on their artwork if they had not seen real ones?
Well, to me, the head and the body look very much like a cat, and the neck is probably stylized. It symbolizes something. There are lots of images of Anubis, but you don't hear creationists saying that there were jackal-headed people or gods walking around in Egypt then.
Again, this is a cylinder seal from the 4th millennium BC. That's 400 years prior to Christ, made of jasper and was found at Uruk in Mesopotamia. Long-necked dragons on it. Notice how similar they look to a Brachiosaurus. This is a skeleton of a Brachiosaurus outside of the Field Museum of Natural History in Chicago. Now, why do they have the crossed necks? This seems to be a common theme. Well, I looked up these crossed necks, and I found on YouTube a video of giraffes fighting and their necks being crossed.
I was thinking of cutting this part out, but I guess we'll let it go because this is his explanation as to why these animals that really look nothing like dinosaurs or giraffes have intertwined necks.
Maybe the most violent giraffe fight ever caught on tape, for those of you who keep track of such things. Stunning video from the Discovery Channel shows two giraffes using their 6-foot-long necks as weapons to go after each other. ABC's Paula Ferris has the story.
Huge claws, sharp teeth, and aggressive antlers, all familiar weapons of the wild. But now, in this rare video, two unlikely fighters are sticking their necks in the ring. That's right, giraffes, the long-tongued, long-limbed, long-shot for prize fighter, battling it out. Watch as they jab their horns into each other, swinging their 500-pound necks with such force. But Toronto-based predator expert Dave Salmoni says not to worry.
It's a bit of a dance. The males know exactly where to stand, how to stand, and what the rules are.
Crews spent a month in Namibia, filming what they assumed to be gentle giants for Discovery Channel's new series Africa, when suddenly their subjects revealed another side.
People tend to think of giraffe as nice, docile, sweet animals, and they generally are. But they're designed for fighting.
These two males are fighting over territory and likely a mate, but not to the death.
The smaller, probably younger male will end up losing the fight, go away, get bigger, and then he'll get his chance next season.
So while we may expect fights from predators like these bears caught in a backyard brawl, or this lioness lunging at the camera, just remember, a deceivingly cute face like this munching on leaves may be bulking up for battle. For Good Morning America, Paula Ferris, ABC News, New York.
So maybe those dinosaurs have the crossed necks because people watched them fighting, and it was pretty dramatic, and so they decided to make their carvings and so forth with the necks crossed of the dragons.
Or maybe they were getting ready to kiss and make a cute heart shape, like this giraffe figurine I saw on eBay.
In Isaiah 14:29, it mentions flying fiery serpents. The famous Greek historian Herodotus, he's considered the father of history, actually talks about giant flying serpents. He said there were hundreds of them. On my arrival, I saw the backbones and ribs of serpents in such numbers it is impossible to describe. The winged serpent is shaped like the water snake. Its wings are not feathered but resemble very closely those of the bat. And that's from the History of Herodotus, Book 2.
He's also describing bones as in fossils, but not real animals.
Jewish historian Josephus also mentions flying serpents. You can look at this up in his The Works of Josephus, chapter 10, where he discusses them, and he also discusses their enemy, the ibex bird.
But Josephus is talking about Moses and describing things that were supposed to have happened in the Bible. This wasn't a first-hand account.
In the Catholic Bible, the Apocrypha, and although if you are a Protestant Christian, you don't reference the Apocrypha as Holy Scripture, we can still use it as a historical document and say, what were they writing about? It says in Daniel chapter 14, verse 22, they have an extended section of Daniel in the Apocrypha. It says, and there was a great dragon in that place, and the Babylonians worshipped him.
Now look at this. It almost seems like he's mocking the Catholics here, doesn't it?
So imagine here, you can see Nebuchadnezzar up on my left, and all these people worshiping him. And maybe they're throwing themselves in and sacrificing themselves. Well, there's a dinosaur called a Megalosuchus. Maybe it was something like this kind of a dinosaur. They actually have statues of the dragon of Babylon. He's painted on the walls in Babylon. And here's a picture of what he looked like. He was called Marduk. He was the chief god of Babylon.
Not only does this look nothing like a dinosaur, Marduk was the god who presided over justice, compassion, healing, regeneration, and fairness. Not something we really associate with dinosaurs.
In Daniel 14:23, Nebuchadnezzar says, "Behold, thou canst not say now that this is not a living God. Adore him therefore." And Daniel says back, "I adore the Lord my God, for he is the living God, but that is no living God. Give me leave, give me permission, O king, and I will kill this dragon without sword or club." Now remember, Daniel was very smart. And he's thinking to himself, I'm going to prove to the king that there's only one God, and this is just part of his creation. This is just an animal. I can kill this animal, no problem. Well, the king is thinking, hey, let's see you do this. You're going to get eaten, right? And he gives Daniel leave. But Daniel doesn't jump into the pit with the dragon or the dinosaur. What does he do instead?
Thank you for watching the video this far, and you're about to get a real treat here.
It says, then Daniel took pitch and fat and hair. He boiled them together. He made lumps and put them into the dragon's mouth, and the dragon burst asunder. Now, what did Daniel know? Pitch is like glue. So he took all this pitch, it's like tar, and he blended it with animal fat, and then he put hair in it so that the glue wouldn't come apart. So basically you've got this giant ball of glue and fat. Now the animal, whatever this animal was, this dragon or this dinosaur, was going to find that smelled good. It's like poison, right? Basically he swallowed it, clogged up his arteries, and it killed him, right? Blew him up.
I'm just amazed he was able to get through that without laughing, because I couldn't have. I mean, he must have taken a few takes. So this guy took pitch and fat and hair and boiled it all together, and it tasted really good. And he was able to just walk up to a giant carnivore and put it in his mouth, where it kind of glued his mouth shut, and he blew up.
Babylon has been found, by the way. That's Saddam's palace in the background.
But wait a minute, wasn't Babylon never supposed to be inhabited again? Never mind, that's a whole different series.
Saddam Hussein was actually starting to try to rebuild Babylon, and he put in all these bricks saying that he was the grandson of King Nebuchadnezzar. But on the old walls of Babylon, there are lions and dragons. This is a dragon from the gate in Babylon. This is in a museum now in Berlin. And amazingly, it still has a lot of the color in it.
And amazingly, it looks a lot more like an ancient dog than any dinosaur.
This is the Pergamon Museum in Berlin, Germany here. This is a replica of what are called the Ishtar Gates in Babylon. Okay, let's take a look at Europe now. What about dragons in Europe? Well, there is a story of St. George slaying a dragon in 275 AD. And so that's a very significant story. He was martyred for his faith in 303 AD.
The dragon slain by St. George is just allegory that shows the triumph of the Christian hero over evil. It was accepted as allegory at the time.
Beowulf slew many dragons according to the stories, and he was killed while fighting a winged dragon in 583 AD at age 88. Now, many people consider Beowulf pure legend, but is it possible that story is based off of an actual historical record? Maybe it's been exaggerated, but he was still fighting dragons.
Well, there's absolutely no evidence for that, and it's almost as if this guy has never even heard of allegory. Beowulf is interesting because it contains both Christian and pagan elements, and it's taught as a classic example of allegorical writing.
The story says Beowulf killed Grendel the dragon by pulling off one of its small front arms, and the creature bled to death later. Maybe it was a Tyrannosaurus Rex. He pulled off one of its small front arms.
All right, cue the T-Rex small front arms jokes. This one's one of my favorites.
Gargoyles come from the time Saint Romain killed a dragon and mounted its head on a building. If you look up the story and look into the details, there is a story about Saint Romain actually killing a water dragon, taking its head back and mounting its head. And that's where the word gargoyle actually comes from.
And yet it was understood by the artists who made these gargoyles that they were mythical beasts and they weren't carving some actual animals. I have an excellent book by Adrian Meyer called The First Fossil Hunters. The book talks about how many ancient dragons or monsters can be connected with fossil discoveries. The monster of Troy vase depicts Hercules fighting a monster that appeared on the coast of Troy, and it looks like a fossil skull eroding out of the side of a cliff. This golden griffin from Iran that dates to the 7th century BC looks amazingly like the front end of a ceratopsian skull. Not only were ceratopsian skulls found not far from there, they were found near mines eroding out of the side of the cliffs, and they were said to guard the gold inside the mines. That seems like a pretty good explanation for how the legends of griffins got started. It also seems like a pretty good way to stop people from going any further looking for your gold. Remember, these people had no concept of extinct species or deep time, so if they saw a fossil like this, they thought the real thing might be lurking just around the corner. Well, that's the end of this video, but there'll be one more video on Did Man Walk with Dinosaurs in this series. Then we'll move on to the Age of the Earth,